don't know how.
There we go.
No, that's not good,
All right,
Marilyn.
here they come. I think we're good. I think, Sarah, you pulled it off.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Do you know how to do it?
No, I don't, but we don't want to lose the view of the people working.
No.
Live from Sangha.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody.
Okay, so then,
You all don't need to do anything, Marilyn.
Okay, because we're just
You're
trying.
fine.
We're
You're
trying,
fine.
We're trying to deal with being able to see you and Jonathan and yeah.
Wait a minute.
I think we'll just put it on speaker.
Is the camera off?
I'm trying
Yes.
multi, but I don't think we want to do that.
All right.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
We're still there somewhere. We
Yeah.
just lost the screen completely.
Well, we're okay because we can
Yeah.
see you, so you
They-
don't
They
necessarily
just
need to be us
started.
right
They
now.
just started.
Yeah, stop worrying about it.
Don't worry about it.
Just leave it.
So, since we're already a little bit over time, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and put everybody on mute just for the moment. If you do have a question, stick your hand up. That is, if you need something before I get back to unmuted. So, welcome to the meetup. We are talking about the history of NICA, and and we've got three people who are around when NICA was born, who are going to tell us a little bit about what was going on in those days. Since there's so many people here, I see your slides, John. Thank you. We're not going to do a check-in with people, but we are going to open it up at the halfway mark to throw it open for questions. So if you can hold your questions, that would be excellent. I am Thomas Griggs. I'm a board member of NICA, have been for a couple years. I'm joined on the call by Jonathan Betzall, who's currently on the board, as well as being one of the founders. Sarah Lindgren is also on the board, and Ruben is on the call. He is as well. And we are available to answer questions about the current state of affairs, but the three wise people we have are going to talk about the origins, and that's something I don't know about, but I'm looking forward to hearing about. I don't have that list of questions in front of me that we talked about, so I'd be doing it from memory. How about we start right off, and Nancy and Marilyn, will you start by introducing yourselves and telling us where you are now and where you were at the beginning of NICA, just to give people a little bit of an intro, and then we'll come back to the questions, okay? And then I'll come to you, Jonathan.
Okay, we were a little distracted trying to figure out how to turn our sound back on. So could you quickly review what you want to hear from us, who we are, where we are now?
Yeah, where are you speaking from, your current life position, and what your relationship is to the origins of NICA? Where were you then?
Well, I'm the person whose name is not on the screen. Marilyn Hannah Myrick. I live at Sangaya. I have been here for a long time. I have never been particularly connected with NICA, although I was involved early on. I was a lot more involved at one point in the Co-Housing Association of the US. And that's all I have to say right now.
Okay, you remind us that the origins of NICA is only one part of the conversation about the history of intentional communities. And that I know that all three of you have a much broader background in intentional community and its formation over a lot of years beyond your involvement with NICA. And I think for the interests of our audience, we're open to any of your experience, but we can key off of the the Northwest Intentional Community Association portion of it. Nancy, you want to check in?
Sure, Nancy Landfair, and I'm here at home at Sangaya. Yes, I do have a bit of history of NICA, and I'll try to be brief. John Affolter, who some of you, if you've lived in the Northwest, would know John Affolter. He called a meeting back in 1991, I think it was, of young men who were interested in community. And they got together and planned a weekend-long camp out at Camp Long in West Seattle. 80 people came for the weekend. And it was an amazing conversation with some good facilitation, and came up with some ideas about how NICA, how this local organization or regional organization might be similar to the national and international FIC organization for intentional communities. And so we did a lot of planning on that weekend, and our decision was to create this Northwest Intentional Communities Association, which incorporated the next year in 1993, about the same time as the large FIC, Fellowship for Intentional Communities, had a big conference in Olympia. And some of you all were there. I think Scotty and Patrick were there. And Jonathan, were you at the conference, Jonathan? Yes? Okay. And so anyway, that's how NICA formed. And so now I think I'm the oldest living founder of NICA. I'm not sure, but I think so. I got a certificate actually that said that a couple of years ago. I was so excited. And I said, how many of you people have been at Sangaya? Because I didn't recognize the crowd. Nearly everyone. I've been to Sangaya. So yes, okay. So does that answer the question, the first question?
Yeah, sure. That's fine. That's fine. We're making this up as we go, so
Okay.
I'm sure that we'll do just fine. Jonathan, you want to check in, introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much. My name is Jonathan Betzall. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm one of the founding members of Bright Morning Star. I would like to give history going a little further back of the intentional communities movement. Actually, when I was looking into it, I discovered that intentional communities were very, very active in the 19th century, when many people in Europe were looking to America as a place to kind of restart their world. They were really sick and tired of having to live under kings in Europe and didn't see a way to get out. So a lot of these idealists, especially the ones who happen to have a little money, would gather that money together and come to the then forming United States and start their own little kind of idealistic communities. And there's quite a large history of this. I don't this is just the outline I want to give you right now. And there were never very many of these, but they were quite influential in American history. There were kind of ups and downs for the movement. But in the late 1940s, after World War II, a lot of people had their idealism tested in the Second World War. They decided it really was time to form a United Nations and in a lot of other ways try to create a new world again. And a number of people came together in what's now known as the cooperative movement. And that in turn spun off a lot of housing efforts, some of which continue to this day. There are actually a couple in the University District in Seattle that were founded about that time as cooperatives for students. And some of those folks sometimes come to some of our gatherings, and we can talk with them when they do. Then, of course, in the late 1960s came the anti-war movement, and that is how I was introduced to intentional community living. I was a college student back near Philadelphia, but I came home to Pasadena, California, and discovered that the local Quaker meeting was sheltering some people who had escaped from the military and were claiming sanctuary in the Quaker meeting house. The Quakers could not have them staying overnight there, so they rented a house for them, which they ran as a commune, and that is where I first encountered communal living. I learned a ton from them. I was so full of these great ideas that when I got back to college in the fall, I started propagandizing. And I don't know whether it was me. I'm sure there were a lot of other people with the same ideas at the time, but eventually a political movement formed just about the time I was graduating college in the early 70s that eventually was called the Movement for a New Society. This ran from 1971 to 78 and basically trained a lot of people in nonviolent activism. And those people are many of those people are still active today. The organization folded in 1988, but they have a very active alumni network that, in my opinion, has accomplished even more than the original organization did. So the MNS, for short, had its training base in Philadelphia. They formed around one house. It's kind of like an ashram because one of the founders had spent a lot of time in India working with Gandhi. He set up this ashram called the Stone House because it was mostly made of stone, and started conducting classes there. And the people who came to take the classes in nonviolent organizing formed intentional community households that for themselves to live in. At that time, it was possible to support yourself on a half-time job while educating yourself the other half of your time. And that was the organizing model that MNS followed. So there at one point, there got to be 27 households in the network that built up around the Stone House through the MNS. They formed an organization called the Life Center Association. If I can share a screen, I'll show you what they look like today. I guess I still can't. But they are still active today. And yeah, the Life Center was a profoundly life-changing experience for many of us who went to live there. For a lot of people, it was training and practice in intentional community living, because these households were really focused on trying to live out the ideas we were getting in the training. This was not like a job where you could, go do your work for the day and then come home and just kick back. No, there were meetings all the time, self-education all the time, unofficial training activities would go on all the time. And the other great thing about the Life Center, and we were training each other, we didn't have email or the net in those days. So a lot of things were published like on mimeograph or telephone trees. We communicated with each other a lot, and the houses would strongly support each other. Like when our house was first forming, other people from other houses would come over and take care of our children. We did not have to pay them for it. It was part of what it meant to be part of the Life Center. This idea of what's now called mutual aid, but in those days we just called it supporting each other. So we're adjusting speakers here.
I think people are getting a sense that the history of intentional community is broad and deep.
Right.
And let me catch up for a minute, John, because we've already acquired quite a bit of jargon here. And I know how many people, if you could all come on screen for a moment, it would be helpful, because I'm going to ask you to vote a couple times where I could see your hands. Hello, Rains. I'll give you a minute to turn your videos on if you can. And I know that's not practical for everybody, but what I'm going to ask you is, how many of you would consider yourselves old timers in the field of intentional community? Stick your hand up. Old timers? Look around, see who's on the screen. Libby, you can put your hand up. You've been around a while on this subject. Okay, thank you. And how many would consider yourselves, hands down then. How many can consider yourselves new to the intentional community conversation, or what we might call seekers? Stick your hand up so we can see. A couple. Okay. 3, 4, maybe 5. Thank you very much. So I just want to acknowledge that we've got 2 different audiences here, some of whom are probably interested in the history, and others are probably interested in what are the implications for me today as I look for intentional community. I'm guessing that those are our 2 big questions. I'm seeing a couple of heads bob up and down. So And I'm monitoring some of the chat as well. What does "we're actually trying, but we can't"? What does that mean? Oh, we try to turn our camera on, but can't. I got you. Okay. Well, thanks for checking in with that. I appreciate it. All right. So we've got, so let me just quickly review. We're talking about NICA. Not everybody knows what that means, but it's Northwest Intentional Communities Association. That's what I introduced myself as being on that board. Several people reference Sangaya. That is a co-housing community, which is one example of intentional community, which has been around for about 30 years now. Depending on how you date it, whether you date it from the beginning of the thinking about it, or you date it from the breaking of ground and the building of houses. So you have multiple dates when you start up an intentional community. Then you heard Bright Morning Star. Jonathan is currently at a place called Bright Morning Star, and that's a different model. It's not a co-housing model. It's a cooperative house. Is that correct, Jonathan? Fair to say? All right. Then you get all those different things that happened through the 40s, 50s, 60s, and all the different names that this adventure has been given: communal living, cooperative living, nonviolent communication, movement for a new society, the Life Center, all the different names that collectives of people have given their endeavors to try to create a better world. Now, the one thing that unites us in NICA is we're helping people find community or build community and get together and live together. However, I should say that at one of our last gatherings, we had a group of intentional communitarians who don't have the intention to live together. They have the intention to provide mutual aid and to have common meals, but they don't have a model where they're intending to share housing. So there's a lot of choices here for the seekers about what the possibilities are. Now, let's get after some of those questions we had. Can we trot those out, and can you steer us through them, Nancy? Because I don't think I ever actually ended up with a copy of those. I'm going to go back and look and see if I did. But
Okay, the first
what was the first one?
is, have you been in a community before the one you're in now? And I just want to say a couple of words about that. It was with the Order Ecumenical and the Institute of Cultural Affairs. Much of the patterns that Jonathan talked about, the meetings every day, every week, the childcare and all of that was very much a part of our life. However, we lived in community in order for the adults to have more time to do the mission of community development, church development, and then children were cared for by other people, like my husband and I did for a while with teenagers, 35 teenagers. And so we were globally spread and working in real village development across the world. And that changed in '84 and freed us up to come here to Washington to begin to build a community here.
Thank you. Marilyn, do you want to say any more about your?
Yeah, Sam, actually, I'm going to read the version I have of the first question and then sort of answer it. That's what was the first community you were a part of and how did it affect you? So the first actual so-called intentional community that I was ever a part of was Sangaya. I lived in a lot of different housing arrangements over time. At one point when I was going to library school in Berkeley, I was living in housing that was owned by the World Without War Council, which was an interesting situation. But as far as a defined intentional community, Sangaya has been it. And how did it affect me? I'm still here. 30 some years after I got involved, I'm still here. It's never occurred to me that I ought to go somewhere else. So thank you all.
Okay. John, you want to say any more about your previous involvement, or did you already cover that?
Pretty much said it. That Peace House in Pasadena, that's not too much of an alliteration. was my initial source of education. And then we started Bright Morning Star because we had children and there were no houses in the Life Center that had openings for people with children, so we had to start our own.
Okay. All right, what's the second question up on the list there?
That one?
Sorry, we weren't unmuted, Nancy. We'll read the question again.
Oh. Sorry, how did your current community begin? What role did you play in its founding? And yes, so for me, the Institute of Cultural Affairs and the Order Ecumenical trained me to be a communitarian. And when we left that structure and came to where Sangaya is, we were prepared after some hard thinking and dreaming and wishing that we could carry out our legacy of community living together here on this property. My husband and I were 2 of the 5 people that began the dreaming part. Our son was the third, and Carol and Stan Crow, some of you may know those names. The 5 of us got together and began to draw people in that were interested in community. And so we really started from the ground floor, except we already had the property. And any of you that have started communities know that finding property is often the big deal, a really big deal, but we had it. And so from there, we just began meeting regularly with people who were interested. And yeah, there were 3 things: song, stories, and symbols. Those things we carried with us from our earlier community, and building structures of care in a community, supporting volunteerism, which we all decided that this community would be about. Yeah, so those were the things, I think, the foundational things. Financing, of course, was a big deal, and we managed to do, what do we call it? Creative financing.
Creative financing.
Yes, loaning to each other, getting, anyway, creative financing. And so we started, we broke ground on April 1st after the dreaming and all of getting through the county.
2000.
2000.
April 1st, 2000. We're celebrating our 25th year anniversary today.
Right.
This year. Not every day, but this year.
Built the houses, and we had 3 that weren't owned, and we heard that if you build them, they'll come. And sure enough, by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, most of us moved in. So that was the founding dynamic. Did I say everything?
And
I don't know.
Nancy, was there a food program from the very beginning? Where
Yes.
everybody ate together? You want to comment on the importance of that?
Oh, thank you, Libby, because that has been an absolute node for us from the beginning. Yeah, when the first 10 years while we were dreaming and planning and running our butts off, trying to get everything done with the county, we did have a food program. We all ate together all the time. And we had 13 teenagers here for 2 years in a boarding school before we actually sent them back to their homes. Anyway, yeah, the food program is one that we paid in every month. We had cooks and we had shoppers, and it made the food program workable. Without those 3 dynamics, people have tried, other communities have tried, and there's no one that has a food program like ours for 35 years. And maybe later it'll be time to talk about it, but it has been, we call it Zone 1. Our kitchen is Zone 1, and that means in permaculture, the place where people gather.
Okay. Thank you. John, do you want to add anything?
So I need to be reminded of the question. So essentially, it's how you got started?
Yeah, I got
Okay.
started.
Sure. So we got started
And
as part of the
part of
Life
what's in
Center.
here, it's about the challenges and what it took to get started is part of the question. You know, what were the essential ingredients of getting started? So if people are thinking about forming intentional community because they haven't been in one, they might like to hear what it takes to do it.
Okay. Well, the number one requirement for having an intentional community is having an intention. And then you need people who want to live in community and carry out that intention. That's the essence of intentional community to me. And that is what we did. We had one child and another one on the way. We were able to gather a few people in with us who were willing to be with us as you know, we were parenting, to support us and to take part in the child caring. And at the same time participate in all the other Life Center programs I briefly described. That's what it took to get us going. We had a lot of outside support from the other houses in the Life Center. People who had already lived this way for years came and sat in our house meetings, advised us, critiqued our methods, and we were willing to learn from them. So it was that combination of the purpose, you know, the people willing to share in it, and then the outside support really made things work. And then by the time we moved from Philly to Seattle, we had quite a well-developed structure going. Because we'd been so focused on children, we kept all of our we had a really well-organized chore system. And we really expected people to do those chores. Otherwise, you know, you'd have crying children on your hands. And no one wanted that. So not everyone needs to do that. If you don't have people who have that kind of need for really regular routines and structure, you can do it differently. But the general point is just to be aware of what people's organizational outlook needs, I guess I'd call them, are. You know, just be aware of the process as well as, you know, just the idea of, it's the nice idea of living together and having your costs go way down.
Thank you. We were talking about a little bit of this at dinner, Nancy and Marilyn and I, and we were acknowledging the range of possible questions people might have in this regard. And I think, Marilyn, you might have made the remark that somebody asked you, they say, I'm interested in starting an intentional community. What advice do you have to give me? Well, do you want to speak to that?
Tell your story.
What did you say? Yeah.
What did I say at dinner? You expect me to remember Thomas, what I said at dinner?
Well, I remember, if you want me to cover it.
Tell me what I said.
You said, well, Nancy said, first go live in an intentional community
Yes.
for a while. You know, she said 2 weeks and I said 2 years. And you said, don't say on Monday that you want to start an intentional community and expect to live in it by Friday.
Being on Friday, yes, exactly.
Yeah. How many years did it take you all to put together Sangaya as a co-housing community? How many years before you broke ground?
Right. Well, it was at least 10 years. The property was purchased in 1989.
87.
87. The property was purchased in 87. Then the residential situation went through various changes. Chuck and I arrived at the community in 96. One of my reasons for coming was I was getting ready to retire from my career as a public library librarian, and my community was my library. My community was the library and the people who came in and the people I worked with. And I thought, who in the heck am I going to talk to once I retired? I think I need to find some other situation. That's where we started looking at community. But from the initial purchase of the land until we broke ground was from 1988 to 2000. So over 10 years, well over 10 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Tell your story.
Which story?
Your manager story.
Oh, that's the other part of the question. See, that was the other part of the question.
Yeah.
What was your role? What was your role in founding?
There.
Or what was your role in getting the community to the point where people could move in? So, as I said, I was retiring. One of my goals as being a librarian was to get into some kind of administration work, but they liked me as a children's librarian, so I stayed there my entire career. But when I got to Sangaya, and Jonathan understands that for sure. When I got to Sangaya, we were starting to look at putting the whole structure together to do the construction. And I learned that there was this job called the owner's rep. Because if you're working with a community where you're building 13 houses, the contractor, the on-site labor person, the architect doesn't want to be having meetings with 13 families all the time. And the owner's rep's job was to represent the community to the people who are going to actually do the physical work of the property. And so that was my job for the next year. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of meetings. I had meetings with the architect and the contractor and those people. We had weekly Monday meetings with them, walked around the property and did all this stuff. Then later in the week, there was a group of 4 of us in the community. We would have meetings and we would walk around the property and do all this stuff. We're talking 2000 when we didn't actually have texting and we didn't actually have really easy ways to communicate, although email existed. And I swear I sent 40, 50 emails every single day to people that we were working with. And we got it done. and we were able to move in 2000 at Thanksgiving. So that's my story.
Yep.
Okay, what's your current relationship to NICA, the 3 of you?
Well,
why are you in support of this organization?
Yeah, I haven't been to a NICA meeting for a long time, but I'm at the point in my life where I'm an old person, along with Nancy, she's older than I am. And I have limits in being able to get around. We're the, Nancy and I and my husband are the rollator. That's the walker with wheels crew at Sangaya. So I'm not going to meetings anymore.
Well, I already mentioned my connection with NICA. I haven't been to a board meeting in years. I have been to some gatherings the last few years, but I'm the oldest living member, I believe, of NICA. So that I'll claim that until I die.
And you're also the oldest living founder of Sangaya.
Yes, right. So anyway, I'm the old one, but sometimes they question my wisdom, but we won't go into that. No, I'm delighted. I was delighted. NICA had a sort of a dark period for a while. Jonathan stuck with it and a few other people, but then it began to get more energy, and I was absolutely thrilled because it was an important thing to my husband, Fred, who passed in 2010.
We're doing a little commercial here. I'm not sure if you can see this. If you haven't had access to Fred's book, Sangaya, The Unfolding Dream, and you want to know lots and lots of details and good writing about our history, this is it. Let Nancy know. She'll get you one. I read about half of it again this morning to remind myself of the past.
Let me make a comment and then I'll come to you, Marlon, Scotty. So the context here is that not only do some of these founders live in the communities that they founded, like Sangaya, for example, or Bright Morning Star, like Jonathan, but they also have been invested in promoting intentional community nationally and regionally. So there's a huge history of advocacy and support for other people forming communities. So that's what you're hearing about. So involvement in NICA, for example, is being willing to support people in the Northwest region in finding their place in intentional community. So Marlon, what do you want to say? Can you unmute yourself, or Scotty?
And first of all, I want to echo what you just said, Thomas, because I 1000% agree. a good example of what you just cited was Osbert Ragland, who lives here at Sangaya, because for a long time, for some years anyway, he was the president of the COHO, National Co-Housing Association. And so that was a way that Sangaya became better known and also got to take some of the leadership role in co-housing communities. But I really do want to say something about the early founders of NICA that I remember, because I went to the, as Nancy said, I was at the 2003 Convocation of Communities at Evergreen State College. Big thing. I think we had over 1,000 people, which is the biggest FIC gathering I can remember, even now to this day. In those days, I remember Nancy and Fred. I remember Fred being very active and reaching out. I also remember Rob Sandlin. And for the longest time, he reached out and would bring new people into NICA, was very supportive, actually encouraged me to take a train up to Seattle a couple of times to attend NICA meetings in the early 90s. So that's, and I think this was, now Jonathan would know, Nancy would know, I think this was before he lived at Sharingwood, or was Sharingwood already founded when he was in those early days?
I think it was already founded, yeah.
Sharingwood being another co-housing community not too far from where we are in Bothell.
The screen often came up for NICA meetings or for celebrations at Sangaya. And so they were a big support system and advocates for community, for intentional community up our way.
And co-housing.
In co-housing, yeah.
Okay, we're about halfway through our time tonight, and so I want to be mindful of answering a few more questions and also opening it up for people to ask questions. One of the key questions we did talk about was, what are the different reasons that people want to form intentional community, especially if you ask that question through the lens of different generations? And you heard Jonathan give some history there about why people banded together and worked together for various reasons, for different purposes, to create a better world at the end of the Second World War, in protest to the Vietnam War in the 60s. And the permaculture movement is another major intention that people have. So what can the three of you say about what you've seen about how different generations in the past and currently, how do they form their intentions to live in community? Any of the three of you can go on that one.
Okay, I'd like to do that. When we moved in 2000, the end of 2000, we had 13 family units. And
About 38 people living
yeah,
on the property.
about 38.
Right.
And there was one woman who was in her late 20s, and the rest of us were more, I think the oldest ones, we were 50, 60.
Yeah, we were right in our early 60s.
And so then we've all gotten older, and the people that have joined us, I would say, at least in the last 10, 15 years, have been single people who have been 50, 60.
Right.
And so it feels to me like these days that there are single people, a lot of single people that are looking for community. We have not had the good fortune to have many families move in, although we have 3 mother and daughter.
Right. We currently have, we just put out our new phone list, so I went in and counted. There are currently 55 people living on the Sangaya properties, and the 3 adjacent, we have 4 adjacent properties that are now a part of what's called the greater neighborhood at Sangaya. Little bit like Rains, if I'm remembering your Berkeley community, it started as a collection of single family residences. So it's grown in that way.
Yeah.
but our population is predominantly over 60 in the community now. We have those of us, I'm going to give away our thing. We have those of us who are 87 or almost 87, that's me, and we have a 6-year-old. That's our age range now.
But only 3 children.
But there are only 3, well, 1 child and 2
Teens,
teenage
yeah.
young adults on the property.
But I think the loneliness, the just the like you, Marilyn, where's my community when I retire?
Right.
And so looking for community. The younger people, I would suggest, are looking for, well, the ones in our community, there's 5 that are very committed. And they all came, I think they all came through our summer garden intern program. So they lived here and most of them stayed. One went away and came back. But I think that many young people, especially with the college programs that are going on around here, I don't know about everywhere, but earth-centered, very earth-centered, planet-centered, forest-centered. And we have all of that people can participate in.
Not
Thank
sure
you,
we
Jonathan.
answered your question, but anyway.
Well, we'll kick it off. We're going to hear from other people in a minute too. So I think the people on the call have got something to say about it. Jonathan, what do you want to say?
I want to talk about economic issues. There are pretty high economic barriers to getting into co-housing. Because, unless you can find a rental spot, you have to buy in, and that means you have to already have accumulated capital. That to me would explain why you have fewer young families. There are many, I don't know what proportion, but many co-housing communities do have rental units that once people do build up their capital, they can buy in. The fact is, though, that in our present society, it's really, really hard for a young person to build up that kind of capital. Being able to own your own house is further and further out of reach for most people, and that I think is having an effect on intentional communities, because people just seem to me to be so much more, money minded these days. In the 60s, 70s, when we were getting going, there was much more spirit of collaboration and sharing in the air. I know there are still people around who have that spirit, but there just seem to be fewer of them. They seem to have more trouble finding each other. So that's the importance of, educational efforts like this and like the gatherings, is to bring people together and show models that you can do it. You don't have to be rich to start. You don't have to be able to depend on your parents for a nest egg, for a starting fund to get going. Okay, there are ways to do it, but you're just going to have to do some extra work that seems like in the past it was easier.
That would be probably the single biggest question that we get asked around the various gatherings, is how do you make this whole thing work legally and financially? And that is evolving. The solution is evolving. But one thing is pretty clear: as the years go by and as we move more into the challenging future in front of us, the answers are to be found in community, not alone. So we get together in community to figure out how to live together in community. It's kind of what the punchline is there. And that's what NICA is intending to do. Our gathering's coming up at the end of June. You can see on the website, please come if you're not already registered. Rains comes every year up from California to join us. Thank you, Rains. So maybe one more question, and then I'd like to open it up to the group and give us at least 30 minutes to hear from you all. What does it take to succeed in community? And I want to pose it more broadly, not just in co-housing adventures, but what does it take to succeed at having an intentional community endure over time in order to buy you enough time to create something meaningful? And I think in terms of critical success factors, and to not think about obstacles or so much as what are the main factors that you've got to make sure you nail or it won't work. What are those critical success factors? And I'm going to start with the 3 of you And then I'm going to throw it open to the whole audience to take that question on, either to ask it in a different way or to provide answers to it. So who'd like to take a shot at that? What are the critical success factors to succeed at intentional community forming and maintaining? Marilyn?
As I heard your question, the first thing that came into my head was be open to change. Because change is gonna happen. And if you have a idea of how exactly things should be, you're not gonna succeed. But if you can be open to change and move with the way things are moving, you can be successful.
Thank you. I feel like we ought to pause for a while and honor that.
I was going to say pretty much the exact same thing. So thank you, Marilyn. The other thing I wanted to say was don't give up right away. Just recognize, I like to say there are costs and benefits to everything. There are big payoffs for being patient and giving people a chance and letting them come forward with their resources rather than saying you have to do things my way. Big payoffs for that. You would not believe some of the things we've gone through.
Well, I would just like to say that this is a co-housing story, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It's like we lost half of our membership in 95, 96. And we could have said, oh God, you know, we're done, we're sunk. We didn't. We just started recruiting again and it worked. But I think the other thing I want to say is, and this is just a sort of a mantra, that singing has been incredibly useful and helpful. Telling stories of the community, stories about your life, stories about anything, just using stories as a way of connecting with each other. And then some of the symbols, some of the things that, I mean, our plaza, our kitchen, all are symbolic places because that's where we gather. And structures that are sustainable, meetings regularly every month, having groups do the work of keeping the community going. And I think those are the things that make it intentional. Eating together is absolutely critical.
It is. And what happens when you eat together is your relationships always improve. That's the other key factor, is pay a lot of attention to your interpersonal dynamics and your emotional intelligence levels.
Yes.
And recruit for people who are open to cooperating. You know, that's a key question. You know, when that's one of the things that we ask people when they apply for membership is, what's been your experience collaborating with other people? And talk some about that. We give them they have to go through at least 2 interviews, one of which has to be in person so we can kind of feel them out and kind of get below the words. See what I'm saying? Pay a lot of attention to relationships. It's absolutely vital.
When people are applying to come to Sangaya, we require 6 visits. And that has to be on the application, when and what the dates were. And so, and we make it clear it's to be a 2-way conversation, because only with a number of visits or work parties or meals or whatever can you begin to have an opinion.
Several of us went to a gathering recently, and there was a group of panelists, and they were talking about the challenges that they face in their Make the World a Better Place organizations. And of course, there was conversation about resources and money and that. But one guy summed it up and said the 2 biggest challenges that he saw over and over. He was a consultant to organizations who were working for a sustainable world. He said number 1 was communication, number 2 was conflict resolution. And what I've seen, I believe that most people would say that's true. The question is, how do you go about those things, right? And some communities, like Star Community, which is South Seattle, they have formed around a technology about staying current with each other. And they subscribe to this process, and you learn it if you join the community, and you practice it. And so one form of intentional community is intention that revolves around a technology of communication and a technology of conflict resolution. I would venture the guess that by far most people who are starting out forming an intentional community aren't doing it with that in mind. They will get to it sooner or later, but they're usually motivated by something else, like an eco-village or permaculture or shared resources or something else. So I just kicked that in. I want to call your attention to the chat. Look in there. There are some comments that you might find valuable, if not inspiring. Let's open it up to the whole group now. What do you want to ask? What do you want to know? What do you want to say? We have at least 25 minutes to do that. What are you thinking of?
Yeah, Thomas, I'm just wondering if other people here are seeking for the first time, the ones we haven't heard from. Are you already in a community somewhere? Can we have some sense of where you're coming from?
Yeah, those were, I don't know if you got on late, Libby, so I don't know if you saw it, but I asked for people to show the vote of hands, where they were from. So I agree with Libby. Those that are seeking, do you want to have pride of place to ask your questions first? Those who are new to this conversation?
I can go ahead.
Okay, Jocelyn, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It's really wonderful. I'm really glad to hear all the perspectives. So I'll share, I don't live in a organized intentional community at the moment. What animates me, I have two kids, age 5 and 7, and what animates me is aspects of their growing up. Wanting for them a freedom of movement, a freedom of association with other kids, with nature, that's hard to access for me in sort of a single family unit. We've sought it out in sort of smaller chunks. One of which was a nonviolent communication family camp, which was which was, everyone contributing to activities for each other, for the kids, for cooking. And that was really, really beautiful. And it was kind of hard to return to regular life after that. And, it kind of brings me to one of my main questions. Really, you hit right on it, Thomas, was about the communication and the conflict resolution. It really hit home for me. We have a family just on the same driveway as us, and we were sort of forming what felt like a neat interweaving with us and their kid. And then there was a conflict with our child and their child, and throwing something at another person, and that's what 5-year-olds do, and it kind of just blew up, and so it's really hard and sad. And so yeah, I'm curious, for us, nonviolent communication, or otherwise known as compassionate communication, has been amazing. Like I said, animating that particular family camp experience. But I'm curious if there are other things, like you were mentioning, Thomas, that you said a technology of communication, but I'm curious if there are other things that people sort of maybe an ongoing, practice that people have, or any other thoughts on that aspect. Thanks.
Where are you currently living, Jocelyn?
I live in South Seattle near Seward Park.
Okay. Let me just say that I lived for a year in a co-housing community in North Carolina, in Asheville, before I moved out here to Seattle 5 years ago. And one of the most compelling things to me, which I saw there, and which I've also seen here at Sangaya in Bothell, is the value of a multi-generational community and the value of having lots of children of various ages and youth, and the transformation that they undergo, the growth and the learning, the maturation is what I really mean. These intentional communities have produced the most magnificent human beings I've ever seen in my life. So that to me is one of the biggest reasons to look for intentional community. Now, to your question, how do you find that? Let me throw it open to the whole group. I do know that Sarah Liljegren does lead family outings into the wilderness, and with an eye to building community and an appreciation of nature. She's now in Eastern Washington, but what do you all know? Where would you go? Where can Jocelyn get some leads other than showing up at a gathering and putting out the call at a much larger group of people? Thoughts on that one? Sarah says, yes, I do. I'm in the Spokane area now, happy to connect you with people in Western Washington who are doing camps for kids and families.
So there are a number of resources for people who are looking for communities. One of the ones that I find most interesting, although not necessarily the most productive for you, is a Facebook group called Seattle Cooperative Housing Network. You might just take a look at that. Just do a search on that in Facebook. And I don't think you have to be logged into Facebook, I'm not certain, but you'll see lots of interesting stuff. You'll see the kinds of people who are offering housing right now, the kind of houses that are available, and you'll see it, a smaller number of people who are out there looking for housing, and you can kind of see the way they present themselves. In terms of the specific problem you brought up, in a situation like that, if this were happening inside a community, we would be appealing to people's sense of what it meant to be in the community. It sounds like something small that blew up into something large, and maybe there's some underlying issues going on there. But part of the idea of the community is to have a safe place to work things out together where you don't have to have lawyers or counselors or psychologists come in. But there's some kind of an internal sense that we're in this together, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I'll come to you in a second, Scotty. Notice there's two parts. One is finding the structure, finding the community, the physical place. And the other is what's the process that you use to deal with conflict. And I hear you actually looking for both. If I'm not, okay. So the style of conflict resolution that you employ is going to be partly dependent on the community that you have been able to build. You could go the other way and say, let's build the community around this one particular conflict resolution model, but that might be a little bit more of a stretch. Scotty, what are you thinking?
Well, I'll just mention a couple of things that have helped me. The first is to really keep in perspective a willingness to compromise, a sense that for every issue, really gauge, do you think this is really important to me, really, really important to me? And do I think this is really important to the group? Is the group about to collectively walk over some sort of cliff and they don't see it? Or is this really, I'd prefer that the ceiling of the common house be painted beige instead of green, And if it's a hill that you're not willing to die on, don't die on it. Because sooner or later, if you decide that you're going to die on every hill, you're going to be buried under one of those hills. But really to just individually keep in perspective what's important, and not just for yourself, but for the group. And there's a little transition that happens as you begin to think less and less in terms of me and what I want, what I need, and in terms of we, what the group needs. The second thing, besides compromise, is just to be deeply curious about your fellow communitarians. Don't just sort of say, well, that's the way they are, or when you see something you don't like and another person just decides you don't like it. But try to understand that, try to look into where that comes from. And the more insight that you have in that, the more empathy you'll develop and the better chances that you'll be able to work things out and communicate with them. So those are, and the very last thing, I'm packing a lot into this, but I'm going to skip ahead to a logistical challenge that people have at new communities. I am very, very much here channeling, echoing an old friend, Diana Leaf Christian, who writes books on how to live in intentional communities. I strongly recommend her books. That's an easy thing. Anyone can go to the library and check out or buy them on Amazon or whatever. Sharing a Life Together is one of them. Finding Communities is another one. Her middle name, Diana, is spelled D-I-A-N-A. Leaf is L-E-A-F-E with an E on the end. Christian, just like the religion. But she said, when I was first talking to her, she said, when you start out building communities, you think the hardest thing to do is going to be to get the land. And she says, so people are going to start looking for land. And she said, actually, getting the land is the easiest part, and it should come at the very end of the community's work process. And she says, but you'll be 6 months into your discussion, and then, oh my God, this parcel just came up. It's 10 miles away in Woodinville. It's 23 acres. It's perfect. We've just got to jump on this because it's not going to last on the market for 3 weeks, which is how real estate is. And she says, in the heat of the moment, you're never, never going to remember that you have to stop and do all the group process first. So she says, I'm gonna teach you a little song to help you remember it. And it goes to the words of an old Christian song. I'm not gonna do the whole thing, it'd be too long, but the song is, it used to be, he's got the whole world in his hands, which is a Christian song. But it goes, we've got to have a vision before the land. We've got to have a vision before the land. We've got to have a vision before the land, but we're going to get our land. And then it goes through a bunch of other verses. We've got to trust each other before the land. We've got to share in meetings before the land, all the things that you need to work out in advance. And there's probably 20 verses of this. And the end it goes, but we're going to get our land. It just reminds everybody that yes, you're going to get your land, but there's a whole lot of process you should go through first. Oh, I spoke way too long.
Thank you, Scotty. I call your attention, if you haven't seen it, there's a lot of resources in the chat. Some are national and some are local, and some are literary. Any other seekers? And Linda put out some good stuff. Linda Taylor, did you want to say anything about what you put in the chat? You're still muted. There you go.
Hello. I just was leaning into recommend Sociocracy combined with nonviolent communication as a great way to build a foundation for conflict resolution and governance and decision making. And I was just about to type in, there's a children's book on sociocracy as well as adult guidance on how to do it. And that's been sort of really very valuable for our community to have that foundation in sociocracy combined with nonviolent communication. So I can't recommend it enough, but we have a communication corner at every monthly meeting that involves role playing and practicing various skills and ideas about, divergent thinking and different ways of understanding people's different emotional and in their emotional intelligence, just giving us guidance on a regular basis. And we've really tried to lean into role playing lately because we realized we needed to practice it, not just hear about it. That's my 2 cents.
And where are you living now?
Green Grove Co-housing in Forest Grove, Oregon.
Do you have any openings down there?
No, we just had our very first resale, and we're hoping to not have another one for a long time.
I hear you. Okay. Thank you. Any other seekers, newcomers that want to ask your question of this particular assembled wise group of people? Okay. Libby, what do you got?
Yeah, since I have been part of the group that has responded to Sanghaya's website for quite a while, I put together a chart showing the communities in this part of Puget Sound and contact and who to contact and what they basically were, how much land they had. And then I also had NICA listed and then the two national co-housing organizations. So it was a chart for people who were looking for a place to land, but we didn't have any openings here at Sangaya. So I've given this out and taught people how to use it as a way to find their community.
And how do people get in touch with you if they want to get a hold of that resource?
At through Sangaya.
Would you stick your
So
email address in
yeah,
the chat?
I'll put my email address in the chat.
Okay. So one of the things I've noticed with the seekers that we've talked to at our gatherings over the past several years has been that they don't tell us what their geographical location is. Like some people, we had somebody pass through Sangaya the other day who was going on a world tour on her own of going to see all these various intentional communities around the world, some of which were very, very famous and long, old, accomplished ones. And other people are not interested in traveling the world. They're looking for something right here at home where they are in Seattle. You know, which one are you? So I suggest you lead up front with what the range of distance is that you are interested in, and that will help you go to the resource that you need. So Libby just gave you a very good local resource. NICA can give you regional resources, and FIC, the Foundation for Intentional Community, can give you national and international options. In fact, Cynthia Tina is leading eco-village tours all over the world. And my sister just sent me an email from down in LA, all excited. She signed up to go to India with Cynthia Tina for like 3 weeks to go visit eco villages in India. But there's a lot of other countries you can pick from if you want to. You know, I don't know, Jocelyn, I don't know if you're going to take a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old around the world searching for something. That would be a hell of an adventure. But everybody's looking for something. We have about 10 minutes left. Sangam? Yeah, go ahead. What do you got?
Hi. Yeah, I was wondering if there's anything close to the Boise area in Idaho. I'm a single mom that has shared custody, and so like for me, I'm pretty limited in terms of where I can live.
Right. It's a great example of somebody else defines where your geographical reach is. Sarah, what do you know about Boise? Can you check in on that?
I don't know enough. I haven't been there yet. It's like 7 hours from me. I can get to Seattle much quicker than Boise from Spokane. But I'm planning on going this fall and learning more. So, I think we've emailed. And
Yeah,
so
I was gonna
once
say,
I
are you
travel
this?
there,
I think you're
yeah.
the Sarah that I've emailed.
So I would love to connect when I travel. Hopefully this
Okay.
October, November maybe.
All right. Are you asking for options in Boise?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody here on this call know of any contacts in Boise? Other than going to the FIC website, we may have some links there. Anybody know of any in Boise?
No, but
I
as an example to that question, you could look up the National Coho USA and the other one that publishes the Communities magazine, and they have directories by state. So you look up the state and you'll get a listing of the intentional communities in each state, and then you can start by contacting those communities that might have openings.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
there are some more leads in chat if you take a look there.
Okay.
Once the call ends, you won't be able to access the chat. So let me come back to you, Nancy,
Yeah.
Marilyn, Jonathan. What are your reflections on this conversation as you've heard it unfold in the last few minutes? What are you thinking?
I'd really like us to meet in person. I
Yes.
think
Yes.
you know, we oldsters have really dominated the conversation here. I'd really like to hear more of what questions people have. You know, I mean, what's on people's minds? We're happy to rattle on for hours, but if you want to know something specific, we really want to help you get into it. So please ask
Well,
questions.
I
Yeah.
think Zoom or FaceTime is a real good possibility, because in person I don't drive anymore, for example. And so, but to have someone call me on the phone, I've done a lot of those kind of question and answers, and that's fairly simple. And but it's personal, you know, you get to know the person you're talking to and can really respond to their questions. So I guess we could put our names on the chat, email. Is that okay? You don't want to do that? Okay. Okay, well, I could put mine, somebody put it on. Rains, would you put it on the chat for me, please? Nancy@sungaya.com. And then we can talk on the phone.
Thanks, Rains.
Yeah, and
Okay.
my phone number's there.
All right.
I can introduce myself, but I've been quiet in part because you've specified people with questions, and I'm more learning just by listening. But in short, I lived at Lama Foundation in the late 80s, which is very much a communal, intentional community. And it's remained a dream for me since. In that interim, I raised a family, had a business, did the whole householder thing. And I'm now living in this van so that I can visit communities, primarily right now in the Pacific Northwest and West Coast, and bring my bedroom with me to make it easier to visit. So I am on that. I'm a seeker, yes, and I am on a mission basically to explore some communities. That was all. Thank you.
With the idea of picking one and settling down there, Alan? Is that your
The
intention?
answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
Kids,
maybe you want
kids have grown.
Maybe you want to put an air tag in Alan's van, so as he travels around and visits all these places, you could get information about them. Mike, do you want to say anything about Puyallup co-housing that as it bears on this conversation?
Sure. My name's Mike. I'm first off, is this sounding okay? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Yeah.
I spent several years trying to do the standard community-led approach to co-housing development. Pretty much gave up on that with some advice from Jim Leach, who's one of the co-housing movers and shakers. I'm now attempting a developer-led approach, where the idea would be to, with Jim's help and some others, take the burden off of the founding group of the site plan, the unit plan, the legal, and all that stuff. It is present a developer-led co-housing, which is extraordinarily high risk and has a substantial risk of failure. Not satisfied with doing that, I'm designing a community where the physical structure, the boxes that people live in, rather than being smaller, more expensive, single-family owned condos, will be larger structures, sort of emulating what used to be called a single room occupancy, or SROs, at the turn of the last century. So the basic building block for my community, which I just submitted to the county last week, is a 6-bedroom house. All 6 bedrooms have both entrance to the core of the house and entrance to the outside, so they can go use the other common facilities. 4 of the 6 bedrooms in each unit will be designed as tiny homes with their own kitchenette and bath. And my hope is, right now, the last piece that I need is to generate a legal structure, which I'm hoping can be a cooperative. And the initial community is built on 4 acres. My hope is to have 48 bedrooms and 8 units on those 4 acres, set it up as a cooperative, and ideally a limited equity cooperative with one share being 1 bedroom. My hope is that that would allow access for people who are not wealthy, or at least a little less wealthy. I'll need a few of the wealthy folks. But the standard co-housing 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo right now in the Northwest is, $600,000 or $700,000. And that just limits things way too much for my taste. So there's a whole lot more on the website at puyallup.cohousing.org. I don't want to dominate this meeting. The Sangaya I was up at the Sangaya for the NICA gathering a few months back and really enjoyed your guys' site. And I'll be up in the Northwest here in another couple weeks, and may even come up to visit and see if I can tap into some of your expertise and advice and recommendations for what I'm doing.
That'd be great.
Co-housing, not co-hosing. There you go. Oops. Trying to get your thing in there. Go ahead.
Mike, would you put your email and phone number in the chat?
I just put the email in, so just put your phone in. Or got the website. I don't have your email. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll put my contact stuff and also a reference to the page on the website that describes my what I call crazy ideas, and everybody can peruse at your leisure and figure out whether any of them make sense.
Okay, Rains, go ahead.
I just wanted to appreciate seeing some old faces new tonight, and what keeps me coming back to NICA as a granddaddy of regional associations. I've tried to replicate some of that spirit in the San Francisco Bay Area and working with Mid-Atlantic Co-Housing in DC of a similar vintage to NICA. But I'm particularly impressed with the longevity of the model, in that it's no more than any one type of community. There have been co-housing specific groups and joint marketing in Portland, and that energy has come and gone. And of course, it's one thing when you're in a forming community desperately recruiting people, but there is very much a tendency once you move in to say, okay, can we just live our lives now, and priorities shift to an internal focus. But NICA has been able to keep up. Okay, let's all keep on learning together, keep on helping with the flow of people to learn more, and just the looking at the bigger picture. I'm looking hopefully that we here in the U.S. can learn from Europe and elsewhere, where there's what's called the social housing movement that incorporates co-housing, community land trusts, affordable housing, and other models of community that just anything getting beyond the market rate issues that Mike was raising. That's a limit to so much, and who can get into communities. And we'll be going to the International Social Housing Festival in Dublin, Ireland next week, and so looking forward to reporting on that and seeing how we can, I know some of this is starting to happen in California and around the US, weave together, and people who had been only looking at one model or only lobbying for one thing or competing, but to say, hey, together we can get more of what we're looking for and build that kind of consciousness, and a role for resident leadership even in affordable housing, and even here in Berkeley, working with people living on the streets. And there's a lot we can learn from people who, of necessity, are living a very low carbon lifestyle, but also the kind of organizing and solutions they can bring. I think it's a two-way street. We can learn a lot from. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Rains. Alan Hancock?
Yeah, hi. So I am a founder of a community. I've been part of that community for over 30 years, and it's the Dumont community in Eugene, Oregon. I know some of you, and there are others who have been part of community for a long time, a lot of founders here. So the question I have, and we only have a few minutes here, so this could go on for a while, but it has to do with succession and transition. I imagine that's on many of your minds. And I'm just curious what thoughts about passing the torch and legal structures and other kinds of agreements that you all might have to ensure the longevity of your communities.
That sounds like a question that deserves a whole nother meetup.
Yeah.
because we are at an age wave phenomenon culturally where that's a ubiquitous question. So I'm sure we could have a lot of people that were interested in that. I wouldn't dishonor it by trying to do it in the next 60 seconds. So would you be available to consider doing that as a meetup topic with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to make a note. And is your email in the chat?
No, but I'll put it in.
All right. Well, it's probably in the meetup registration, but stick it in here. It'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So like Jonathan said, love to see you all in person. If you can make it to the gathering, you can go to our website and which is Northwest Communities. So what is our website?
It's NW
Yeah.
communities.org, I think, isn't it?
And I think it is. Somebody test that out and see. I'm terrible about remembering.
nwcommunities.org.
Okay, thanks, Rains.
Yes.
All right, great. So yeah, come if you can. Otherwise, be in touch with us. Give us ideas for other meetups that you'd like to have, because we exist to coordinate the resources to give you what you are looking for. I want to thank Marilyn and Nancy and Jonathan for keynoting our look back at the history of intentional community, and nationally and locally. And of NICA, thank you for kicking us off on that. Thank you for your wisdom. And I know there's far more fascinating stories that the three of you are able to tell than we had time for tonight. So I look forward to other opportunities where we can do that in the future. I want to thank also the other board members that have been contributing to the series of meetups. And thank you, Sarah, for spearheading these. It's greatly appreciated. And thanks to past NICA board members, Libby and Scotty. I don't know if you used to be a NICA board member or not, but you might as well have been, because you've been around and kicking in support.
Not a board member, but just a long-term member for sure.
Long-term member, yeah, okay. And do you want to say something else, Mike, before we go?
I was just wondering if the gathering at Shea Haley is going to be anything other than in person. I'm sorry, unfortunately can't make it. Will there be any kind of remote access at all?
We do not have plans to do that. I don't think the venue lends itself to that very well, because the main meeting is quite a ways from the common house and it's out in a field under a tent. And it may be a little tricky to try to stream that. But we'll see if we can take some notes for you. So thank you all for coming. I want to honor your time and get out of here as promised. Hope to see you again at other gatherings. Blessings and all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
You're welcome. I'm saving the chat here. There we go.
Oh, good.
Yeah, somebody asked before we shut off the recording.
Can you send that out or you
Yeah,
just saving it
I'll-
some?
I'll get it posted.
Okay,
Okay, night night.
thanks. Night, night. How do I get out of here?